Are you struggling to get your nonprofit fundraising successfully off the ground or hitting roadblocks? In this video, I'm going to talk about some of my biggest fundraising mistakes so you can avoid what I did and get your nonprofit fundraising off the ground faster. Welcome back to my channel. My name is Amber Melanie Smith, and I make videos here on YouTube to help aspiring changemakers with tips and strategies to help you change the world and live a life of impact and purpose. I make videos on starting and successfully running nonprofits, on social enterprise, social impact, making a difference, and so much more. So please don't forget to hit that subscribe button on my channel and ring the bell to get alerts for every time I post a new video. Also, please like this video because that tells YouTube that they should be sharing it with more people who want to make a difference too. If you don't know my story yet, I started a nonprofit organization many years ago and it's now my full-time career. But in the first couple of years, getting a handle on fundraising strategies was not always the easiest thing for me. But I've learned from past setbacks and mistakes, and we're on a much more successful path now. Fundraising for nonprofits is a learned skill, and if you're not already in it, it can feel a little intimidating. So without further ado, here are my top 5 fundraising mistakes and how you can avoid them. My first and arguably my biggest nonprofit fundraising mistake was not understanding what motivates people to give. It turns out that it's 2 main things: impacts and relationships. I want you to think about the last time that you actually donated to a cause. Probably it was because somebody you know asked you to do so or invited you to make a donation, right? People are much more likely to donate to a cause when asked, or the cause is run by someone they know, someone who's a friend, someone they trust and are familiar with. This is part of the relationships motivation. What that means is you should always be asking people you know to get involved. I know it can be hard to not want to be that person who's always asking your friends to get involved in your cause, but you've got to start somewhere. And the big thing is you've got to be out meeting new people all the time to grow that circle of trust and build those relationships so that you have a wider pool of people who might trust you and be willing to support your cause with a financial donation. The second part of that, as I mentioned before, is impacts. So people report caring more about the impact of an organization than about things like what they call overhead. Now, you might have heard people say something like, well, I don't want to support that organization because they have a high overhead. That's actually an incorrect mentality that the nonprofit sector is trying to combat and is making some headway in. The term overhead has gotten a negative connotation because it is poorly understood. What overhead is actually referring to is some of the critical infrastructure that nonprofits need to effectively and efficiently succeed in their mission. Just consider that despite what you might have heard people say about overhead in the past, what people ultimately want when they donate is to know that their donation is making the biggest impact possible for the people that you serve. So to get people motivated to give, talk about your organization's impacts as often as you possibly can, from the number of people or animals or parts of the earth that you've served to some of the stories about the difference that you're making in people's lives. My second nonprofit fundraising mistake that I want to talk about is underestimating the connection between visibility and marketing and fundraising success. So it is definitely proven true that the bigger the audience we have, whether that's a following on social media or our newsletter or people coming to our events, the bigger audience we have, the greater pool we have of potential donors. And it's become easier to raise money the bigger this audience has become. So one of the most important things that you can do when you are starting out fundraising and continuing fundraising is just be out in the community and visible as often as possible. This is extremely true when you are first starting a nonprofit. You want to be out there and attending as many community events as possible to start building relationships, getting your name out there, and making sure people remember you because they're constantly seeing you. You want to be asking to speak at meetings and events in your community, even virtually during the pandemic. You want to be regularly sharing what you're doing with the media, and you want to be networking with other professionals in the business and nonprofit world wherever you are. Stay on people's minds. The third nonprofit fundraising mistake that I made was putting stats ahead of stories. It can be really easy to make this mistake. When I first started out, I just assumed that if people knew how big certain problems were, that they would just spring to action. 2,000 people experiencing homelessness in our city, 15,000 children being trafficked in the country, or gazillion pounds of plastic in the ocean. But it turns out that numbers like these, while helping you build a case, can be a little too abstract to really compel people to give. Human brains don't quite work that way, so you should definitely include stats like that on your organization's website and in your marketing materials, but you shouldn't only include stats in your fundraising materials. When trying to raise money, you should focus on the story of one person experiencing homelessness, one animal who just got adopted. The idea is that by telling one story, you can inspire the donor to feel empathy or sympathy or see themselves in the subject of the story. And then you don't want to just share that person or animal's experience. You want to talk about how your organization made a difference in making life better. And that's the story that will make the donor want to support your work. Over time, you want to collect as many stories like this as you possibly can and continuously share these with your donors. The fourth nonprofit fundraising mistake that I made was underestimating the time it can take to build a real relationship with a donor. Unfortunately, it's extremely rare that someone who's a complete stranger to your cause will donate to it. There can be exceptions, of course, like if your cause or your organization is getting a lot of media attention because there's a sense of urgency around it. Something like a natural disaster would be a good example. Usually though, it's about creating a funnel, and by that I mean you are casting a wide net, you're trying to figure out who your audience is, and this is something that sales and marketing people do all the time, right? So you're identifying who's going to be the type of person who would care about your cause, and then you get the message out to them, and then you build a relationship with them down the funnel until you end up with a smaller group of people who are more likely to donate because they are the true loyal fans. And once you identify these true fans, you want to really work hard to build a trusting relationship with them. Talk to them regularly. Ask for their advice on things, bring them in and make them feel like part of your cause. Then you'll establish a relationship where they know who you are and trust you, they love what you're doing, they believe in what you're doing, and they're willing to donate. In my experience, building relationships with kindness, trust, and integrity always increase your likelihood of getting donations. And the key thing is to really be patient, because building these authentic relationships can take a little bit of time. But if you are out there being visible and making sure people consistently see you and remember you, and that you're having conversations and prioritizing building these relationships, it will work. And the fifth and final nonprofit fundraising mistake that I made that I would like to share with you is not carving out enough time to thank and engage with your existing donors. One of the most important things that you can do is to keep your donors engaged after they give. It's kind of like what they say in business, it's a lot easier to keep a customer than to gain a new customer. So immediately when you get a donation, you should be thanking them. Reach out with a personal message within 24, 48 hours max. Over time, you should be continuing to engage with your donors by inviting them to your organization's meetings, by telling them what's going on behind the scenes, by sharing your impacts in something like a monthly newsletter or just a check-in message to see how they're doing, how their family is, how their life is going. If you can do this well, your donors will donate again and again. And like I already said, it's a lot easier to gain donations through your existing donors than through new donors. So now I want to hear from you. What are you struggling with fundraising? What are your current challenges? And what are some ways that you've overcome your challenges? Share these things in the comments below so that the community here on YouTube can jump in, learn from you, and you can learn from them. Well, I really hope that you liked this video and you found it useful. Like I said before, don't forget to subscribe and like this video to tell YouTube that you think it should be shared with more people who also want to make a difference in the world just like you. One more thing, if you happen to be on Facebook, I have a great group there called Change the World or Bust, where myself and other change makers are having conversations about how to make a difference, nonprofit management, all sorts of things about changing the world, and I hope that you can join us. That's all I got. Thanks so much. Hope to see you next time.